Becky Allsup is one of those sneaky successful entrepreneurs we sometimes find almost hidden in the local community. She's the owner of Becky's Custom Interiors, which in turn holds Niche Design House and Rebecca Windsor and Associates. Niche is primarily an upscale commercial and residential design center, and Rebecca Windsor and Associates provide national scope design, procurement, and installation services, especially for rapidly growing retail franchise operations. Becky is also a partner in a fast-growing drapery manufacturing business in Texas. My introduction to Becky came many years ago when she was one of the very first on-site clients for my mobile food business, Bear's Backyard Grill. My mother-in-law referred me to her good friend Becky, and we catered a bunco night for a fairly large flock of ladies. It was a lot of fun. We reconnected recently on referral from one of my members, and I confess I had no idea as to the scale and scope of her many business interests. This business journey was a joy to uncover. Young interior designer sees opportunities everywhere and attracts a team of smart, loyal, and dedicated people to bring those opportunities to fruition, and they stick around. Becky's special sauce is her strong sense of team and family, an intuitive sense for opportunity, integration, and smart business. I'm certain you'll enjoy meeting my new friend, inspiring woman in business, and one of our newest Loco Next Level members, Becky Allsup.
Let's have some fun.
Welcome to the Loco Experience Podcast. On this show, you'll get to know business and community leaders from all around northern Colorado and beyond. Our guests share their stories, business stories, life stories, stories of triumph and of tragedy, and through it all, you'll be inspired and entertained. These conversations are real and raw, and no topics are off limits. So pop in a breath mint and get ready to meet our latest guest. Welcome back to the Loco Experience Podcast. I'm honored today to be joined by Becky Allsup. And Becky is the founder and owner of Niche Design House, Rebecca Windsor and Associates, and Drape House. And they're all owned under
Becky's Custom Interiors.
Becky's Custom Interiors, or at least in some parts. Mm-hmm. So I think we might as well just start with what do your different businesses do and for who?
Well, it started off with Rebecca Windsor and Associates, was kind of the segment of business that I started out in, where I had the opportunity when I lived in Minneapolis to make drapes for a large commercial project.
Oh.
At the time, I had been a single interior designer in Minneapolis, and I thought, well, it can't be that hard. So I made a few phone calls, and I figured out how to make commercial drapes, and I did the first job. And then the second job that came about.
Money?
No.
Okay,
I did it all
just
myself. I installed it myself.
By the time the drapes were as nice as you needed them to be.
Exactly. They were
good.
Green velvet, if that tells you anything. And so after that, I was offered to do a second job. And so I did that. And then I went to the company and I said, hey, I can do this 20% cheaper if you'll just go direct with me instead of making me go through the middleman that we had used. Mm-hmm. So I took on that, and I did that for about 7 years very successfully. I had some mentorship in that company that we worked with, and one of the men there kind of just directed me on how to grow my company. So we went from making drapes in a tiny basement to making them in a workroom, which is a commercial manufacturing, I guess, where you make
like
the drapes.
Almost like a subcontract manufacturer.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And so then after about 7 years, I went back to that same company because I'd watched their other vendors do things at install that failed. And I said, hey, if you'll use me, I will take over your furniture, your accessories, your art.
So you went from their drape supplier to their organizer of these massive projects.
Yes.
Oh,
and
wow.
My first one was in Vestavia Hills, Alabama. And I
Were you
showed
still
up.
in Minneapolis at this time?
I was in Minneapolis at the time. And I showed up and I had everything. No, actually, I take that back. I wasn't in Minneapolis. I had moved here in 2008. And I showed up with everything. And I'll never forget, I had for years made drapery for commercial projects. And I showed up at this project and the drapes were too long. Everything else went perfect. All the new stuff went perfect. But the thing I'd done for 7 to 10 years was not. And I remember just sitting there going, okay, what are we going to do? And so a few phone calls later, I had 2 women show up And they took my drapes and took them and hemmed them and had them back up the next day. And I walked out of that job perfect, perfect as it can be in a commercial world. And my friend and I that worked for me at the time, we went on our merry way. So that was how it started.
Well, it's interesting to me that like expanding that niche of just I sew drapes and I make them, and just observing, you saw that opportunity to, I can do a lot of this stuff if I wanted to.
And hopefully better.
Are you just a very organized person, or you got a lot of vision? Like, what was it that helped you to recognize that you could succeed in pulling off these complex projects?
Well, I am organized, and my friend that worked with me and still does work with me on these projects, we brainstorm really well together. And when we go into these projects, everyone that I hire that works with me has to kind of adapt into my way of thinking, so to speak.
Yeah.
But luckily, it's not that hard to do, but we all do. We kind of have the same collaboration approach.
Yeah.
We may not always like what the other person says, but we have enough respect for each other to do that. So in Rebecca Windsor, we are very open and honest about everything, and we hold nothing back.
This original person sounds almost like a partner type.
She's
in
amazing.
Some ways. I mean, she's been with you forever.
She has since 2008. She is amazing. And actually my furniture buyer as well is equally amazing. And then I brought on a friend from Minneapolis to run our logistics side. And then I have 2 warehouse guys who are totally like my sons. I love them.
That's
and
awesome.
Then I have the niche side of things.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
So after Rebecca Windsor had been established and I had moved in my company to Colorado, I looked around and there was no place to go buy anything. I mean, I thought I had moved to no man's land.
The boonies.
Minneapolis.
Did you move here? Did your husband's work bring you or something?
My husband works for Seagate Technology, and so we moved to, and Fort Collins is where we decided to raise the boys.
Yeah.
So
do you know the Burkses, Kathy and David?
I don't know.
Oh, David works at Seagate.
I'm sure
as well.
my husband does, but I don't. My rule of thumb has always been I have to live away from anyone that works for or with him. I don't know why. That's just been the way it's been. So we moved here in 2008. I had Rebecca Windsor. I transferred that, and then there was just nothing to buy. So I thought, well, if I want to do interior design, I'm going to have to just create
get my
that.
fingers on the materials from time to time.
And I already had the buying channels, right? Because I was already purchasing things. So I started out, my husband and I went and we bought this tiny little space off of Green Ridge Road in Windsor. It's a little flex space. And I opened a little storefront there, and it was 2,500 square feet. So the first part of it was niche, and the back half was my warehouse, because my warehouse still wasn't scaled as big as it is now. And my friend, who I work with, Julie, helped run that. And then we brought on another friend who is now my daughter-in-law's mother. And we just kind of organically grew. Wow. That way. And then I ended up with 3 designers on staff and a full-time assistant for them. And then we've moved into Centera and have a retail store.
You're just kind of clumping these long-time cheerleaders with you for a long time. I mean, it's a mark of, I think, a really good leader.
The posse.
I mean, it's not that not only did they not fear doing bold new adventures with you in the earlies, but they've stuck with you for a long time too, and I think that's really great.
I haven't run them off, and I'm so blessed to have them, because not only are we friends, so when we travel, which we do a lot, it is super fun, and also we know each other, so we know not to take things personally, and we know how each one works.
Well, you get to understand those gaps and those strengths and appreciate both sometimes. And then Drape House, and we will explore all of these business journeys more as well.
Because it's never enough to do 2. You have to add a third. So I have part of my business, of course, is nationwide. And so I have different segments of the country. I have installers in each country, segment. Like I have New York installer.
Your favorite vendors or whatever you would, so to speak.
But drapery and shades, it does require a little bit of finesse and exactness, because there's really not a lot of room for error in your
Nobody
spec.
was hanging your drapes sufficiently good.
Well, they did okay, but then when I had to, when you're doing a huge project and you have 180 shades and you have, your spend on these jobs may be $100,000, you've got to make sure they're done right, and you don't really have the time or luxury on ground the
Yeah,
day of to
yeah.
have it done. So you have to do a lot of
You
background.
can't always have a seamstress there ready
Right.
to hem your drapes.
Right. And so having one person go in and install, just like when I do the upholstery pieces, it's better to have one person who is in charge, who does that.
Yeah.
So the work is
This
consistent.
is your job.
And we also at that time were developing a brand with this fitness company to grow them too. And so you had to be very specific. So the standards needed to be the same throughout and consistent. So I met this installer from Dallas. His name's Aaron. He's a great guy. And
How did you meet him?
I was introduced to him by one of our vendors who
Okay.
sells our window shades to me. And so Aaron and I hit it off. Of course, I'm from Texas. I was born in Amarillo. He is a Dallas dude, but he also lived in Oklahoma, and I had lived in Oklahoma. So he's younger than me, but, we just hit it off.
Yeah.
And we were talking one day when I think we were in Chicago, and he said, I think we need to open a drapery workroom. And that was something that, you do need to be somewhat vertically integrated. You are
Yeah.
able to save 20% about of your overall
Right.
cost if you can own the company and have the funds to invest in it. And of course, my son at the time was going to college in Dallas. So I said, well, why not? I'm there all the time anyway.
I can write off my flights to go
Yes,
see my
exactly.
son.
So we did. We found a spot down on Cole Street, down in the design district.
Yeah.
And he is able, because he is the installer side of what we do, he helps manage that. And then we did a little research and found that the 3 largest companies in Dallas that were workrooms were owned by people 75 or older. And we have a little bit more life left in us than that. And not that that's old by
Right.
any means, but, we have a little bit more longevity in our work life. So we just took 2 people from
Grabbed
2 of
his
those
favorite
firms.
people.
We did. We interviewed and took 2 people from 2 of our favorite and largest producing firms and offered them a little bit more money. And they enjoyed it because they could start up a business and
Right,
create it
right.
the way
Be
they
part of
wanted it to
something.
work.
Yeah.
And then we found, we were able to find with one of our guys, the manager of our workroom. He had already been a manager of a workroom, but he had some women who had been very faithful to him for like 15 years that would do side jobs for him. And so we hired them first.
Just kind of scale into it.
Yep. And so we have 5 seamstresses now. We have a manager and assistant manager, and then Aaron and Lauren do the day-to-day, and I come in and drive them crazy about it once a month.
Do you sell these drapes to other people and
Oh,
install them
yes.
and stuff too? How much of your business is their business at this point?
Really not much. Rebecca Windsor contributes maybe 10%.
Wow.
Dallas is a hopping place, and Texans love their design.
Pretty things.
But
yeah.
we have been able to do work in LA and Beverly Hills. We've done work in New York City.
That's
We've
cool.
done business trying to reach, nationwide. It would be great, but we are limited in space currently, so we would have to really scale up to become like a Rose brand or another huge national workroom like that. But we are happy where we are. We've did great the first year. The first year exceeded all expectations. So we expect year 2 to be phenomenal.
Oh, so this is a young one.
It was pretty young.
Yeah.
It's been 2
Did you
years
open
in
it
the making.
COVID?
We did.
Oh, wow.
And still have done pretty well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm real proud of Aaron. He's done a great job.
Yeah, sounds like it. And we'll talk more about that adventure, I think, along the way. One of the things we decided we should talk about early in this conversation is how you and I first met.
Yes.
Would you like to share first?
Yes. So I had a dear friend. Her name was Suzanne, and she and I were sitting in her kitchen one day. And she said, I said, I'm going to have this Christmas party, and I need an unusual, something unusual about it. And she said, well, my son-in-law happens to be running a food truck. And I had followed Kurt and Jill, through the years with Suzanne,
Sure,
of
her
course,
stories
talking to
and
her
whatever.
at lunch and everything.
Mostly
and
she was complaining about me, but she said
that
he cooks
is not
pretty good.
true.
Okay, just kidding.
That is not true. She dearly loved
I
you,
loved her
Kurt.
very much.
And for people listening, Suzanne is no longer with us. She passed away about 2 years ago. And But before that, I would have lunch with her about once every 3 months. And her favorite topic was always her children. But, of course, you were one of. And so she mentioned you. And so I said, okay, well, I'll try Kurt out. I don't mind. And so Kurt and Jill brought their food truck to my Christmas party, and we served our guest food outside.
What was that? What was that chicken dish that you asked? You had a special request. It was a fancy kind of like I don't know if it was Moroccan.
It was.
It was a Moroccan chicken.
And it was
something.
Tacos, wasn't it? Because
yes.
I'm sure being from Texas, it was a
yes,
taco.
we did tacos, but there was a special Moroccan chicken kind of flavor that I tried to do.
Yes, and it had some kind of pineapple and some kind of a jerk chicken type thing. I had found it when I was at Market in High Point, North Carolina. And I had gone to a food truck there and told you had to figure out how to make it.
I was like, I came up with this really good menu. I loved it. It was a really fun engagement.
So fun.
I don't know, was there 20 people or something? Pretty
there
good crowd.
There were actually more than that. We had 6 tables. I think there were like 28 to 30 people because I didn't play bunco that night.
Yeah.
It was my neighborhood bunco party.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I didn't remember that it was a bunco party for sure. So, well, thank you. I appreciated that early bit of business there, and appreciate just being able to think about Suzanne a little bit. So, what I think I would like to do is to jump in the time machine and go back to Amarillo. Is that what I remember hearing?
Well, I was born in Borger, 50 miles north of Amarillo.
All right.
Toward
so even more in the boonies than Amarillo?
It was an oil town.
All right.
Phillips Petroleum Company has a huge refinery there.
Okay.
And my dad and my whole family worked for the oil company, or they ran the pharmacy in town, or the dentist. That was my family.
Town, basically. Was your dad an engineer?
My dad's an engineer, believe it or not.
Well, I know your husband's an engineer, so sometimes that
my
runs
mom's a teacher.
in trends.
Yep. And so we lived there until I was 10. When I turned 10, we moved to Stavanger, Norway, because that was the North Sea oil fields. And my dad worked onshore, but with the North Sea oil production.
Interesting. Oh, and tell me before that, how many of you? Did you have more siblings too?
Just one brother.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Me
younger,
and my
older?
brother. Younger, 2 years younger.
Okay.
Yep.
And what was that like?
Living in Norway?
Yeah.
It was wonderful. We moved there, and it was great. My parents took us touring every chance we could.
Oh, cool.
And there were a lot. In Norway, things closed for a week during Easter at the time. So, like, even the grocery store, it would only open one day during Easter week, and you could only buy bread or milk. They wouldn't let you buy anything else.
Wow.
So you never stayed in town. You left. So we'd go to London, Amsterdam, Italy, Greece. We went to Greece once, just wherever my parents thought would be fun. So we all loaded up and went.
And was that like loading up on a train, loading up a car?
It depended.
Yeah.
Sometimes we would get on a ferry, and like you could take a ferry from Norway to Copenhagen to Denmark, and we would go do something there. And then sometimes, of course, you would fly. Most of the time you flew because you can't drive across unless you're on a ferry.
Now, was there like an American school there or
I went
something?
to Stavanger American School.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And is that like a little tiny school then, or are there Americans, like it's a big city and so there's 5,000 kids of Americans going in there?
It was small. I'm trying to remember. So there were like 3 fifth grade classes, and each one of them probably had 10 kids.
Okay.
So it was very much one-on-one. It was a very, I had a great education there. I found that, it's funny how I keep in touch with some of those people through Facebook and all, but everyone has done, they've gone on, they've always gone to college and been successful in all different things. It puts credence
to the notion that if you put a really good education into a kid, that helps. Well, and probably also most of their parents were petroleum engineers.
They were all engineers,
so
most of them.
Yeah.
And they all came from pretty driven families.
Yeah,
a lot of 2-person families. No one really was divorced. It was kind of interesting. And that's an interesting dynamic I like to follow sometimes. It's like, does a 2-person family really yield more later on? There are benefits and cons. And everyone has their own situation, but it was just kind of unique.
Yeah.
It was a unique utopia, so to speak.
Did you learn Norwegian at all? Did you make friends with some of the local kids?
We played with them, but your school bus picked you up on the corner, and you went to the American school. So not as much of that integration. I mean, we sledded with them in the winter and we played, and so you spoke simple, but not like, I never was fluent.
Yeah. Fair enough. And how many years then was that?
3.5 years in Norway. We came back when I was a freshman in high school, and we went to Bartlesville, Oklahoma, which was the headquarters of Phillips Petroleum Company.
Oh, wow.
And
did a tour of duty and impress the right people out there?
I don't know about that, but I don't know any of that. My dad never really talked about his job a lot, but we ended up in Oklahoma, which wasn't bad because it was pretty close to Texas.
Yeah, well, and it was probably better than the little teeny town in the middle of boonies.
It had a McDonald's, which was a huge thing.
I remember when we got a Subway in Jamestown. It was amazing.
It was amazing. So we had that. And again, Bartlesville was kind of a utopia, too. It was 35,000 people. Everyone there worked for Phillips or 2 other companies. And
interesting.
Everyone, went to the same church, or there were like 3 main churches. You'd either be Catholic, Episcopalian, Presbyterian, or Baptist. I was Baptist. So everything's focused in on your church life a lot then. That was in the 80s.
And were you allowed to date a Catholic boy if you were a Baptist girl?
I don't know. I found me a Baptist boy, so I never had to go
You'd
there.
have to go fishing in that swamp. Sorry, just kidding.
I know, exactly.
I remember that was like in my town, we were basically Catholics or Lutherans in North Dakota. And like they were all friends. It was all good. You'd hang out with whoever. But when it came time for dating and marrying, then it was like, are
you on the back row on the pew, or do you not go at all?
right, exactly.
It's one of those.
So, tell me what kind of a young lass you were. Were you sassy already by the time you were 14 and returned from Norway here to Bartlesville?
Yep. I have always been the type of child that if my parents said don't do it, my big toe went over the line to see how far it could go. And I did it. One of my mom's favorite stories is I had gotten in really big trouble one night at home. My mom had told me not to offer to type the football team's papers, and of course I did. And the typewriter broke halfway through the night, and my mom told me again, don't do anything. I'll take it to work the next morning and put it in the typewriter, and I can type the T's that broke. But of course I couldn't wait. I went in and hand wrote all the T's in. And so
the exact same T that everybody else.
Which was not, yes. And so the next morning, my mom was very upset with me, and she said, if you get in trouble one more time, I've had it. Well, I got to school, and that was the day I got caught skipping class. And I got called into the principal's office, and I'll never forget sitting there begging I can't remember his name. His name was Ben. I can't remember his last name.
I've already got 2 strikes with
Mom. I said,
Mom.
please don't call my mom. And he goes, well, I'm sorry, we have to. So it was just attention, nothing big. But so I was a good kid, but I just pushed myself that way.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Were you athletic? Were you studious?
I twirled.
Twirled?
Yes. So, you have to be in band, and then you twirl with a baton.
Yeah, with a little
sidelines,
stringer on the...
Or fire or whatever.
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
So I did that, and I played the flute.
Okay. Yeah, fair. And how about, were you strong in school?
Yes, straight A's. That was not allowed to not have anything other than that.
And I'm imagining it's not because you worked super duper hard on it.
No, it's just kind of fun. I have always just been an auditory learner, so I don't really have to, study hard.
If I sit through class and listen and then read my notes one more time, I'm good. Yeah, that's me too, kind of.
Yeah.
And then, what was in front of you from there?
Well, after that, I went to OU, and
Which is where?
In Norman, Oklahoma.
Norman, yeah. I've been in Norman before, actually.
Sooner born, sooner bred, and when I die, I'm sooner dead. That's their song. And it's the big Sooner covered wagon that runs out on the field. Football's big in Norman. And so in Oklahoma, there are 2 teams. There's OSU, Oklahoma State, and University of Oklahoma. I went to University of Oklahoma, the arch rival of Texas, University of Texas. And, of course, my family is from Texas, so that was a huge deal.
Oh, wow.
And my brother chose OSU, so...
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was actually, a few months ago, I was in a conversation with somebody about the Sooner, namesake and whatever. And you know the story, I'm sure, about who the Oklahoma Sooners are. I mean, it's like cheaters. basically,
They
they're
ran across the
Oklahoma
line.
cheaters. They snuck across the line before they were supposed to
stake their
get
homestead.
to get their best homestead. That was for a good reason.
Yep,
But still, I'm just not sure that's a really great mascot. It's like,
I know.
anyway, whatever.
It's pretty funny.
Do
and
what we have to win.
It is, and that's how it was then. I mean, you see those pictures of how all of the people were lined up on the line and they shot the gun and ran to get their claim, you
Right.
know, and the people who had snuck out the day before.
They were already chilling.
And they got to keep it,
Right.
which is still interesting, right?
Well, hard to enforce who did and who didn't and stuff, right?
Exactly.
There was no law to speak of
Right.
at the time.
No
so.
law, right.
So what did you go to school for?
Marketing.
Okay. And why? Like, did you
Because
have
it was
notions of
easy
business?
and I could get done.
Did you have entrepreneurial instincts early on? Were you lemonade standing or things like that, or DECA,
I didn't
or
really do that.
4-H, or debutante
DECA.
balls? Like,
Nope.
none of that Texas stuff?
I worked in college just because I wanted to. My parents didn't require that. I'm sure they didn't mind, but I worked in a travel agency, and I remember going to a class. There was some lecture I had to attend, and there was an entrepreneur there. And he started talking, and I did sit there thinking, well, that would be really fun one day to own my own company. But, you know, I wanted to get married. I wanted to have children. And so that was the primary focus of my college days.
You were looking for your MRS degree.
Yes, and I
Did you find it?
I didn't find it until I was out, but my husband, I met him when I was 16.
Oh, wow.
And I met him after church one night at a pizza place, and he waited on us. And I said to my friends, I'm going to marry him. But he was 4 years older than me, so no 20-year-old is going to date a 16-year-old for a couple of years. But believe it or not, the first football game, his season tickets were right behind mine because we were both A's.
Oh.
And I guess they aligned those alphabetically somehow.
And what was your maiden?
Andrus was
Okay.
my maiden name.
Yeah.
And so I had seen him on and off through the years, of course, in Bartlesville. It's a small town.
Right.
But he asked me out after that first football game, and so there
we
you
are.
go.
Very
32 years later.
And was it a rapid romance, or?
No, it took him, well, I mean, I finished college in 3 years
Yeah.
because I wanted to get done, and he did not want to get married, so I moved to Houston, Texas. I took a job with
wow.
Foley's department store, which is now
Yeah.
Macy's,
And
and the buying
absence
office.
makes the heart go stronger.
Sure enough. And so he proposed in March, and like any good Southern girl, you count 6 months. And I happened to get married on OU Texas weekend, believe it or not, at 7 o'clock when the game started.
And who do you cheer for? Are you OU fans?
OU,
still?
mhm.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry for teasing the Sooner
That's okay. No, you can do that. I don't care.
I don't care about OU.
Yeah,
so,
me either.
I'm a Bison, North
There
Dakota
you go.
State.
Yeah, that
They got
doesn't have,
whooped
yeah.
on Sunday, but anyway, I
As I
digress.
say, that's nothing to brag about.
Well, they still won like 9 out of the last 12 championships.
That's
but,
true.
So, talk to me about that early career. You said you were in the. I'm sorry. When
Yeah,
you
I
moved to
worked in the
Houston?
buying office.
Yeah.
I worked in.
It's not really a
Kent's-
marketing thing necessarily, or
Well,
I guess
some.
it is, right?
You,
want to
have to
buy
have-
things that people want to buy.
Correct, and you have to figure out how to promote that
Mm.
and things. But the buying office was, definitely a corporate world. It was downtown Houston,
Mm-hmm.
so coming from a small town, being in a big city of
Probably
6
the
million
biggest
people.
change,
Then,
aside from Norway, in your life to that point.
oh my gosh, I remember my dad, had given me all the horror stories about the accidents that could happen in Houston, and I remember my first day, I just cried all the way from my apartment to my job because it was just, I was terrified,
Yeah.
and so I went to work there. I worked there for a year, and we got married, and I moved back to Oklahoma. And so at that point, I had to move into the retail store. So Foley's transferred me into the retail store, and I did a lot of course, then, I had staff. I ran departments in that,
Oh, wow.
in the store.
You're just a whippersnapper at this point.
Oh, no.
And was your husband already an engineer?
Yes.
And what's his name again?
David.
David, thanks.
He's a mechanical engineer. So he and I had settled into Moore, Oklahoma, which is between Oklahoma City and Norman. It's just a little suburb.
Yeah.
And life was great. But I had decided then retail was not for me. I did not like working weekends because he was off. And so I went to work for State Farm Insurance. And I handled injury claims, specifically death claims that went to court.
Oh, for like the corporate office kind of thing.
Right.
or-
Well, just
yeah.
like a claims office
Right,
there.
right.
Back then, they had individual claim offices, not like now where you just call a 1-800 number.
Right. Okay. Yeah,
Right.
they had regional offices at least where people went to the court cases
Exactly.
and blah, blah, blah.
So, like, I was in court a lot. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
like, if anyone had a death, it would go to my unit, and you would have to mediate through that. And it was a very difficult thing.
Right.
You had to mediate through telling people that, yes, they were at fault. And while you're sorry that they passed, there's not a legal
Do you know
way.
the two things insurance companies hate? Accepting risk and paying claims.
Well, that's probably true. And again, my rebel streak on that was I was always happy to pay, and I always tried to be very fair because
Yeah.
I didn't believe you could be. The insurance company had a contractual obligation, so you always had to honor that contract, and you paid the fair value. You didn't have to pay more, but you should always pay fair.
Right.
And to determine that, there were lots of things that you were trained to do. But, like we would have a court case, and let's say I never lost, which I don't know how, just good attorneys, I guess, that we had on staff. But after you lose sometime, or after they lose and you win, then you can go back in and still mediate that so they don't appeal, right? You can
Right.
get you can get a dismissal with or without prejudice, right, on that final
Right.
release.
We can't pay you the $250,000 you're looking for.
But we will always pay what I have originally offered you, and sometimes even a
Wow.
little bit more, depending
Wow.
on the facts of how the case went out.
Right.
Because I feel like that's the fair. You don't ever go back. If it was worth something then, just because you lose does not make you
Right.
worth less then.
And if you thought somebody was actually trying to screw you,
right.
then you fought like nails to keep that from
Right. Well, and
working
just
too,
to
I
be
bet.
fair, I mean, and hopefully you never took anything to court. If you owed it, you owed it. And if they were unreasonable, then yes, sometimes you have to go to court. But
Yeah.
I learned a lot through that.
That was interesting. How did that, that's quite a pivot, right?
It was.
How did that come about? Was there just somebody knew somebody, or you saw a bunch
just
of
saw an
job
ad
ads and
and
okay,
just
I can do that.
applied for
It
it.
pays a little more than what I'm making now for these bozos. And
Yep.
so, all right.
And it was great. I did that for 3 years. We were married 4 years before we had kids. And so I did that for 3 years. I loved it. And then I quit 2 weeks before I had my first child, and I didn't work again for 8 years.
And how was that? Like, were you just overjoyed? Like, you were at MRS, or were you like, I'm kind of bored and I miss dealing with all the real people and doing
wasn't
hard
bored,
problems? And
but
I'm sure you weren't bored, but
yeah.
there's a difference between mitigating, or not mitigating, but what's the word you used? Mediating
Yes,
insurance
yeah.
conversations and going to court and having that intellectual strategy and different things. And then, I'm trying to figure out why my baby won't sleep or why they like
Right.
peas so much better. It's just not you're busy, but you're not as
Yeah.
intellectually stimulated.
But I really just poured my life into my 2 boys. I enjoyed every minute of that.
Okay, good.
And I just kind of went to where they were. And we had lots of activities because I'm a very activity driven person. I coached their t-ball team when no dad would do it.
I love it.
That was really interesting, yelling, "Jonah, stand up, you're going to get hit in the outfield," when one of the little boys would lay down in the
Right.
outfield. But it was just fun, and I had good friends. We had a really great group of friends there. We all had kids at the same time, so we
Yeah.
played play dates a lot. And in the meantime, my design business kind of started taking off then because I was bored a little bit. So
Where did the design business start?
I just started being able to put things together, and people liked it. And so then people would start asking me to do it. So, I would say, okay, I'll do
So
this.
that was the thing that you did. How long after you had the first kid did you start doing your first kind of project?
Probably 3 years.
Yeah.
My
Okay.
boys are 3.5 years apart. So around that time.
Fair
yeah.
enough. Okay.
I had remodeled a house, and David and I had taken that on and redone the kitchen and a few other rooms. And then we
Yeah,
just kind of
yeah.
grew from there.
Wow. And that was kind of, to some extent, really the bulk of your design experience to that point.
Right.
I mean, you had at least some visual trainings and education from your
Right.
marketing background and stuff, but you're
The
like,
business degree, I feel, is super instrumental. And that's one thing with all of my interns that I hire from CSU and all, is I try to really make sure they understand business is just as important as a design degree, if not more so. Because if you can't run a company and understand the effects of spending money and getting a return on your investment and where to value your time, you can get really bogged down in the creativity part, but that doesn't produce money.
Yeah,
very
I like
often.
to say, especially to early stage startups, it's pretty easy to add value to the world. Like anybody can do that if you work hard. It's not always that easy to extract it back out for yourself.
Exactly.
You have to you're a steward.
And you have to figure out what your value is, not overvalue, which I see a lot, but to know where your value lies.
Yeah.
and what you can be good at, right?
So I guess take me through, we already kind of mentioned those first couple clients, but take me into like first having, were you solopreneur for a while?
Well, so in between
Or did
all
you
this,
already
having
need
kids
help?
and all, I
Yeah.
moved to Minnesota.
Oh, yeah,
My
yeah.
husband got transferred
We got to
in
Minneapolis somewhere
2003.
along the way, yeah.
Right. And so, when I moved, of course, I had a new neighborhood, a new house. And so, I had done my house, moved in. And then, of course, all the moms come over for Friday afternoon club.
Love your drapes.
They do. Where do you get those? Well, guess what? So that's how that whole thing started.
And plus, even in Texas and Oklahoma and stuff, like people are fancier than they are in Minnesota.
Midwest.
And so
Yeah.
you being even subtly fancy up there probably caught a lot of attention.
And it was because I was from Texas, whereas they all...
That's why you and Suzanne jived so much, because you guys were Midwestern types that,
Yes, we were.
that were fancy.
And it was unusual back
Right.
then, right? So, yeah, that's what we did. I mean, I just started doing different people's houses, and I had built my business. It was just pretty small, but it, broke even, gave us a little extra cash, and it was great. And then I had the call I guess it was in '09. It was when I got my first, I had moved to Minneapolis, in 2003. I'm getting my years mixed up. I moved to Colorado in '08. So it was in '04 that I got my first call to go into this fitness company on the spur of the moment.
Are you allowed to mention this
Yeah,
fitness
it's
company?
Lifetime Fitness.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, hey, we got a whole bunch of projects. Do you want them? Or like, how did this?
I had to fight for them,
Okay.
and prove. So the girl that was
fight
the
for
purchasing
one and then
agent.
get more?
Mhm.
Or okay.
So it was a blind company that did not do drapes. They just sold at the time it was wood blinds. Everyone had wood blinds in their house.
Yeah.
The dumbest thing ever invented, right? But we all loved them. And they still do serve a great purpose. We can go into that later. But that's what they had been putting in, and they didn't have anyone to produce drapes. And so I had to learn. I just called my favorite fabric vendor, and I said, hey, I've been asked to do this. Who do I go to? And he said, you need to go down to the design center in Minneapolis, which, Minneapolis is a 3 million, plus
the
people,
region,
right? And so they have a great design center. And actually, Minneapolis is a real hub for interior design. You don't realize that, but a lot of HGTV shows originate out of
really?
Minneapolis.
Huh.
Back then, Trading Spaces, one of the regulars on that show was Genevieve, and she was out of Minneapolis. There were just a lot of different names.
Sorry
And
for
of course,
lacking the cred there earlier.
oh, yeah, I know.
But away from Minneapolis, it's probably much less, right?
Much less, but they have the Dunwoody Design School.
I've heard of that,
and
yep.
So there is just a little hub.
So it's a little bit like Fort Collins and CSU creating all these veterinarians. Like we got
Exactly.
the best veterinary service and
Exactly.
the worst paid vet techs in town.
Exactly. And it's true. You have that wealth of knowledge in that
Dumping
little
all this
hub.
knowledge out, and they're trying to start businesses and doing this and
Exactly.
that. Yeah, cool.
So when I went in, I went into the design center. I was super paranoid because here I was a mom. Basically a mom. That's always been my first role, right?
And they're like 6 and 4 by now, or something. Like
at that
ish?
point, they were 4. Well, actually,
Not even.
4 and 7. Yeah.
That's close.
Yeah, close enough. And so, I was really unsure of myself, but I went in, and this lady named Connie took me under her wing, and and I'm a quick learner, but within a month I was raring to go, and I wanted to learn how to do it all myself. And so, because I've always believed if I'm going to ask anyone on my staff to do something, I'm going to have done it first, and I'm going to know how to do it so that I can make the criticism needed or whatever, that would need to
Interesting.
happen.
Yeah.
And you would not believe to this day how many installers that I'll get. They'll say, oh, you can't do that. And I'll go, yeah, you can. Because I've done it myself, and you may have to put your ladder this way and hang off of it this way, but you can do it.
So Alma, who you've interacted
Mm-hmm.
with through email, she was hired as an intern, and a week after she came on board, actually before she came on board, but after she was hired, my other person gave notice, Rory, and so. Alma was 18,
Oh, wow.
first semester at Front Range Community College in marketing. Thought it was interesting. And I was like, well, I'm not going to hire right away. And like, I don't really know how to do Rory's job, but she's got really good notes, and I'm pretty confident you can figure it out. So we have a different perspective on that. A lot of the digital stuff and stuff that Local Think Tank requires for me to create podcasts and stuff, I could learn it. I'm not dumb. Like I'm here just by myself to push the
You're
record
doing a good
button.
job.
Yeah, and all. But for the most part, like I just don't have any willingness to kind of dig into that space very good, which is a vulnerability.
It is, and it's hard.
And it's a strength.
Right.
Like most things, right?
If you can delegate it and feel good.
Yeah, I feel good.
Yeah.
I trust Alma a lot better than I trust me on any of that stuff.
Well, and I do trust people to do things better than I do, but I do like to have that underlying knowledge so that when we do have conversations, I can at least know where we're starting.
Where the boundary line is.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't think that I do it great. It's just that I then can call someone on it. And also remember, I work with tradespeople and different people in different regions. And like particularly in Boston, they don't really like to talk to a woman always in certain trades.
Oh, there's extra chauvinism in
there
Boston?
There is. Well, I'm not just calling Boston out. My son lives in Boston. I love Boston, but
hey, you pricks out there, you should treat your women nicer.
But they do. You know, like there are certain predisposed things, and so especially being a woman in business, sometimes, and I'm not a big woman's liver or anything like that, but I just have seen that, and so they think they know more than me, or they can, and especially when you deal with union versus
so you wanted to be able to do it yourself and be
I wanted to be able to say yes,
I could do that. Yeah. Talk to me about that, like outside of that dynamic of maybe a little bit of aversion to even working with you because of your womanness. Was there other places like banks and lawyers and things like that as you went along? I mean, you were this is early 2000s. We're starting to get kind of
even
aware
08.
by now, hopefully.
I went to a bank in 08 when my business was just really starting to escalate and do well, and I had asked for a line of credit. Now, I have built my company solely on my own. I have never had any investor, nothing, no capital. It's always just been my husband and I. And so I had gone to a bank because I finally had decided that in order to scale, when you're buying for these clubs, you have to expend hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy the furniture and everything that's going to go in, and you don't get paid
it's pretty
until
much a
30
guaranteed
days.
Payment, but I got to put it in first.
It is a guaranteed payment, but it's not until you hope it's a guaranteed payment.
Ish.
Yes, but it's not paid until 30 days to 45 days after install, right? Or according to the contract.
So you need a lot of capital.
I needed a little bit of. I needed $100,000.
Wow.
Is what I had decided I needed, and the first banker kind of looked down at me, and then I had a great banker here, and shout out, his name's Chris Burns. He's phenomenal.
What's up, Chris?
Yep, I love Chris, and he has been my banker for the last, let's see, we're 2023, so for at least 10 years, if not longer.
Nice.
But he just took me where I was at, and he just kind of walked me through that. And, it's been a great relationship. And so, I need a line of credit occasionally, but not very often. Of course, now I've amassed enough to be able to do a lot more. But, yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. I remember that's probably the biggest evidence of kind of whatever male chauvinism or whatever you want to brand it, because I got into banking right out of college.
Okay.
And like 3 times during my career, ladies from the bank that were either my peers or my subordinates were like, Kurt, you're so not a male chauvinist. Like, what's up with that? And I was like, I don't know. I just, I'm where I come from. Women are equally in value to men, and we share burdens, and we're different, and
that's okay to be different.
And super okay, yeah. So anyway, I digress, but it's always interesting to me the barriers that ladies perceive along that way, and
some of those are, well, I don't want to get into all that because it's such
there's
a sticky
some psychology
topic.
There
is. And I've never had a victim mentality in my life. I was always taught that you just take what you're dealt and you figure it out.
And you didn't have a whole lot of examples of women that started businesses and grew them and hired people and told bankers where to shove it if they didn't want to play.
I have to give my husband credit for that because I was not necessarily raised to be a risk taker. I had a great life growing up, nothing like that. But when I got married, my husband I would have an idea and we would talk about it. He'd go, yeah, go do that. And sometimes I would think, oh, he doesn't care, about me because he doesn't care if I'm hanging off a ladder, 10 feet up in the air or whatever. But it wasn't that at all. It's just that he knew I could do it.
Yeah.
And he does help me if I need help. That's not the issue, but he knows I can. And just having that in your relationship, I mean, I give him full credit. I would not be successful today if I hadn't had him behind me, pushing me and just encouraging me to try.
I like
And
that.
there's never any, like, even when I have failed, there's never any condemnation on anything. He'll just go, okay, well, let's figure that out. And we just talk it through.
It's a little bit like that behind every successful man. It's in your case, it's behind a successful woman is a supportive husband.
And all this time he's had his career too and done fine, but and great at his career. But
and I'm sure he lives vicariously through you a little bit. Because he's a working stooge, right?
Yes.
Like he's
he does supplier quality engineering, and he's a very thoughtful, introspective person, but that works really well with what I do because he is the figure it outer, and then I'm the implementer.
Yeah.
And sometimes I like to run ahead, but
For sure.
But we work it out pretty well.
I like it. I want to, because we're getting close now, right? Because the Rebecca Windsor and Associates is kind of gathered some of its momentum and things. We're growing, and now it's time for Niche to come on board and really explore that. I want to take a quick break before we do, and we'll be right back.
Sounds great.
The Loco Experience is sponsored by InMotion, providing next-day delivery for local businesses. If you need anything delivered in northern Colorado, InMotion's flat fee service is a great resource for your business. Delivering from the Wyoming border to Denver and anywhere in between, their clients range from small breweries to real estate companies. InMotion can deliver almost anything you can imagine. If this fits a need for your business, contact InMotion directly by emailing them at inmotionnoco@gmail.com. That's INMOTIONNOCO@gmail.com, and mention you heard it on the Loco Experience. So we're back. When we left, we were getting close to the origins of niche design house. But also talk to me a little bit about execution, and building a team to pull off these things, because
it's a lot.
Right.
So you have to find people who can mesh with you. And then also the client that I mainly work with Lifetime, it is a very fast-paced and very demanding client.
Yeah.
So you have to be...
So is this like half your business or something?
Yeah, probably close to that.
It still is. You're still doing work for Lifetime.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Still am.
Okay.
And last year, 13 openings. So
Wow.
it was a lot. Yeah. And they've, there's other different aspects of their business that I work into.
Do they have other people that
I
do
work
stuff
with
for
a
them, or you're
corporate
kind of the
design
main
firm
one? Yeah.
that they own and that is in-house with them, and then they send me the information, and then my team executes.
Get that and get this and get that.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And so it's really important to find people who can be I am a huge mantra. One of my statements that I say all the time is mission first, people always. I know it's stolen from someone, but I love that because it always means that we always are on task to, no matter what our client asks, it is never too much of an ask, or there is, because there's always a way to phrase it. Well, we can do that. This is the cost, and we offset it. But, you think about it, if you're trying to open something and get a business open and running, sometimes the cost is, I'm not going to take them to the cleaners. I'm going to be ethical about it. But there is a cost to escalate, and there is a cost to hold.
Totally.
And they're willing to do that because, they're looking at the grand scale and you can't be pigeonholed into just thinking only your perspective.
Right.
You have to realize that their membership and their, scaling
for them
too.
to wait a month to get open.
Right. It's not going to work.
You might think it's crazy to charge an extra $50,000 to get it done that much faster, but they're like, well, but it'll cost us $200,000 to not get it done that fast.
And so we always work in tandem. And I've never charged $50,000 to not, but there are definitely costs to hold or accelerate.
It costs you money,
right? But my value comes in when I can pivot and turn to meet that demand. And so that is one thing I stress all the time is that we're flexible no matter what. And I always believe we come from a place of yes. We never come from a place of no, because number one, I am not a negative person, and number number two, no one wants to hear no. They want to hear, well, sometimes it is, let me think about it and come up with a solution.
Or how,
right.
Or what else.
Today, I had a designer call me. She was on site in Scottsdale, Arizona, and she didn't like where we were going to hang a curtain rod.
Okay.
And I said, well, the drapes are made. So let me brainstorm tonight and see what solutions I can offer you so that you don't see that curtain rod. There was only one place to hang it. She wanted it in a different place, but that wasn't possible. So let's come up with a solution and we'll figure it out. I mean, nothing is no. So she can rest assured that we're going to take care of it. And yes, it may cost $2,000 more, but we'll figure it out. And so you always come from a place of yes. I have always prided myself on that. So, and I teaching my staff that, hopefully I have emulated that enough that they all know. And whenever we do have that, none of us are ever penalized for saying yes and figuring out something. That is something you are encouraged to do.
As long as you can figure it out.
Which is kind of how niche then came about,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because there was, when I moved here, like I said, I thought I had moved to the boonies from Minneapolis. We were all sophisticated in Minnesota.
Right.
And I moved to Colorado, the Wild West, and, a smaller town. And, I was used to going shopping at the Mall of America and being able to find, pretty much anything I wanted. It was easy. And it was a little bit more challenging here.
Right.
So,
well, probably not even just that. You could go to the Mall of America and find what you wanted and then find the manufacturer of that thing and buy a bunch of it.
And that was the trick too, was as my business was scaling up, I was needing to find more custom things that could be longevity. Like, for instance, at the time there was a copper table that my client liked. Well, it was can metal, and so anytime it's in a commercial building, so anytime anyone sat a beverage on it, it would leave a ring on the can metal, and it wouldn't work. So that was one thing I tried to bring into with some value engineering in this business, where I needed to find a manufacturer of something, of a table or whatever it was.
That was cool like that.
But had that same aesthetic, but yet could hold up to a commercial use.
Yep.
So one day, a sales rep visited, as they do, they call on you. And I was just telling her, I can't buy that, from you because it's not commercial grade or it's not going to hold up. And she said, well, here's a guy in Denver. I'd like you to meet him. And so again, another sales rep introduced me. And I went down and met with this man. His name is Zia. And we came up with a way to customize and take things to, like, if the client has an idea, then we can customize it and make it for them. And so
on volume
and in volume, and we can stock it and guarantee
that's cool.
brand consistency. Remember, when you walk into One Lifetime, it should look the same in Troy, Michigan as it looks like in Wall Street. Maybe not exactly the same building, but the aesthetic should be the similar feel so that you feel you're moving across, right?
Yeah.
So part of that, the VP of design at the time and I worked really hard to come up with ways that we could value engineer things you would see like in a magazine to a specific commercial use that could hold up. So like I said, my first one was Vestavia, Alabama in 2009, I believe. And that one, that furniture still is in that club today, and it has not had much work done on it. I mean, it's held up is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So you get, you may spend a little bit more as a commercial client on the front end, but you have a longer lifespan and you depreciate things out over 5 years, but you know that you're not going to be replacing it and it's not going to be breaking. And I can guarantee the manufacturing of it and I can control that. So branching into that side of it. Now, granted, I don't own the company that manufactures, but I work closely with Zia. But that's how Drape House started, was to become more vertically integrated too, so that I have more control over what I am selling, so that I can guarantee it and replace it as needed.
Right. Well, and to some extent, what I think I'm picking up is that with Niche Design House, if you didn't have that, in some ways you'd be at risk of losing kind of that leading edge of things, like opportunities, right? And how much of Niche's stuff do you buy? Like, do you buy your materials directly through? Do you get a surcharge, or is it more of like a showroom kind of thing?
Well, it is.
How separately do you run them and all?
Well, right. And so they are two separate LLCs, right, that feed into an umbrella company, Becky's Custom Interiors. And then Drape House is a separate side
partnership
business.
with your
It's
man
a
Aaron down
partnership,
there.
right.
Yeah.
So what we do with niche or niche, if you're Texan, it's niche.
Sorry.
But, you can say it
Niche.
either way
Sorry,
you want.
yeah.
I don't care. That is a showroom. So it is a storefront in Centera.
Yep.
People can walk in and they can choose to buy what I have there.
Right.
We also, in the back of the store, it's a 4,000 square foot space. So in the back, I have my design firm is back in there, and they have desks that they can work at. We all work all over, right? But they have.
So do you do also? I'm sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
just luxury home designs and things like that.
Full scale, everything.
Part of that. So this,
right.
So this Rebecca Windsor as kind of a niche,
it's the procurement.
a niche in procurement and stuff
Right.
like that. But then niche doesn't just have the showroom and stuff, but it also will design your whole
Right.
place,
We are
get
a full
you the
service
stuff.
design. Our
put it in-
logo
yeah.
is defined by you, but designed by us. So we take, and that's why niche came about, was because it was taking what someone saw as their vision and niching it into their lifestyle so that it fits them.
Yeah.
A lot of companies here in town, and there's nothing wrong with what they're doing, I'm not saying that, but they have a look. And so, like Studio McGee, for instance, at Target, you know that Shay is going to pick all white. It's going to have gold accents, but not everyone can do that in their house.
Right.
That doesn't look good for everyone. And in my perspective, I am mission first, people always. So you always go directly to what your client wants. And so when you look at my portfolio on my website, it isn't as clean as some of these other firms that have, the same look.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge my advertising firm and I work with, and my marketing firm work with all the time. How do we represent ourselves? Because we are very niche oriented. But Rebecca Windsor was a niche business set up to service a large scale client and to do things and that's what I do, like for a hotel. If they need a certain piece of furniture, I can have that made, and I can usually do it cheaper than we can buy it in a case good line. Mm-hmm. And then I can also guarantee it. And I can also guarantee when I can get it in. And that's been a huge thing since COVID.
Yeah,
is even
supply
the
chains
supply
have been
chain.
rough, right.
Right. And so, I source, I have, of course, probably 300 vendors that I can go buy from at any given time. But I try to economy scale my business so that I deal with mainly 7 large vendors.
Okay.
And then I have...
They're all large. You leave the little guys out on that part.
Well, they're national firms, but where I put most of my money into buying so that I have pull.
Right.
Because it's not fun when, like, for instance, this week, I just had this call today. I had ordered rocking chairs for a Boston job.
Okay.
And today they came back 6 weeks later and said, well, we're not going to make that chair. And I said, yeah, we are going to make that chair. What do you mean? It's been 6 weeks.
Right.
But I have enough pull then that I can usually rein those type of rogue decisions in, because it's like, okay, well, you're going to jeopardize how much of your business for 2 rocking chairs that you have the frames for, but you're just not willing to produce anymore, and there's not a warranty issue with it. Anyway, and like I said, I try to be reasonable.
They're
but
like, the rocking chairs are a pain in our butt. We don't want to make them.
Basically, and I said unacceptable.
Like, whatever. I buy $250,000 worth of stuff from you, or $2 million or some baloney every year.
And you're going to take care of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Give me my rocking chairs.
Right. And so, I mean,
fair.
And that doesn't have to, you don't have to be
you don't
terrible
have to abuse
about
your
it.
pull.
No, but
I think
when
hand
there are
is a better
decisions
word.
like that.
Are you a Seinfeld fan?
Oh, I love Seinfeld.
So hand is really, it's you don't have to use the pull. You just use the hand.
Yes,
like, talk to the hand or give me my chairs.
Exactly. And sometimes that's just how that works. But that's what I do for my clients, is that behind the scenes that they may never ever realize that, but we have gone and said, no, that's not acceptable. We have to, and everyone does that. I mean, I'm not special because I do that, but it's always putting the person and the mission first. And even it's inconvenient to me, we're going to do what it takes. It may take me 5 more hours to convince them to do that. But so tomorrow we'll see if my discussions that I had today will yield fruit with 2 rocking chairs that I need for an apartment complex in Boston. We'll see.
So, is it public that you're like kind of merging these?
No, I mean,
brands,
it's
or-
not anything hidden.
Okay.
And so I'm trying now I'm working with my marketing gal who's extremely intelligent.
She is.
She's amazing, Jonna Eichel. If anyone wants to know who she is, she's amazing. But she has really helped me pull my brands together so that I can, for the next stage of growth, I'm getting my women-owned business certification, which allows me to bid different jobs. And that just has
You've been a woman-owned business the whole time.
it has
just so
solely
you know.
owned, 100%, yes. But to get it official for the government, it does open up some more doors, and then to also, grow. I mean,
Would you like to have more lifetimes? Like I'm
I'd
thinking
like
about,
to have 2 or 3 more.
like my friends at Chiba Hut are like building a lot of Chiba Huts, and they're taking like every time they find somebody, they gotta like have somebody build it out
right
at that time. Now they don't really need any design; they got their
Right.
stuff
They
figured out.
get that.
So that's probably not you.
Well, and when you brand, that's, like them.
they
They
don't
go
have
in
any
and
drapes.
everything's the same. They don't have drapes or shades. Yeah.
Right.
And, a lot of these vendors now will go in and get national accounts. Like Chick-fil-A has their own
Right.
company that does all their shading. And but again, they have those people then have regional installers. And so we do the same thing. Like if you need anything in Detroit, I have an installer there. If you need something in New York City, I have a guy there.
Yeah.
And then when I don't, I can usually either send one of my local people here or
just
something.
sub with somebody that you've met
Right.
before and worked
Exactly.
with, and because that's part of the value that you provide is like I've got a
Right.
network that can get stuff
Right.
done in a lot of different places.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And the same with movement of furniture throughout.
So, what's next for? Are you going to start another business next year? Or the
If
year
I
after
do, I
that?
will be shot.
By who?
By all of my employees, probably. Or my associates. I don't like to call them
Yeah, your
employees.
team,
My
whatever.
team.
Yeah. Do you want to shout out to some of the real impact players and describe them at all or
Well,
anything?
I love
Or is
them
that
all.
too
I
high
can.
pressure?
So my head designer is Sarah.
Okay.
And she is redheaded, and the personality goes with it.
Yeah.
She is extremely ingenious and problem solving and very creative.
I like
And
it.
under her, we have Taylor and Berta, who are both equally strong designers. They just don't have as many years of experience.
Fair.
But as that team goes, that's an incredible team.
That's cool.
My store is just, I opened my store mainly just because I wanted something fun and to have a variety offered in Fort Collins. There are other great companies, don't get me wrong, around here. And I've searched and been in all of them because I definitely go in and check out all of my
It
competition.
has improved a lot, actually,
has, right.
over the last 10 years or 12 years or whatever.
It has. It's grown immensely in that field. And like I said, everyone that I've encountered is super nice and sweet. So, and everyone has their own niche or niche. But my store, I try to focus, like on the end user. I hate design that is not useful. And so it doesn't do any good if it looks pretty, if it isn't livable and useful for you.
100%.
So that's always the balance. But niche was started for that because I wanted to have a storefront. So, and the design firm is my love, right?
Yeah.
I love the design, and probably commercial design is my true love because I love working in the commercial space. I love the fast pace of it.
Yeah.
I love
Just
the
the
challenge.
durability and the obligation.
And on
all
that side, I have Yaz, Julie, Karen, and then Patrick and Joey. And so that team, we've been together so long. We are family.
Yaz?
And Yasmin.
Oh,
That's her name.
nice. I like it.
She's great.
It sounds like a
And-
foreign national almost, potentially.
She's an American citizen.
Well, that's great.
And
Is she from Middle East or Egypt?
She's from Venezuela.
Oh, Venezuela. Oh, I've met a
Yeah.
few Yasmins.
Yes.
Oh, but they're usually Middle Eastern. But that's
It's
awesome. Good for you.
Yazimin.
Like
Yeah.
Venezuela has been the nation that's been the most beat up by a terrible government over the last
You're not
100
joking.
years.
And she still has family there,
yeah,
but
God bless her.
she's lived here for many years, gone to college here. Her dad, when they came over, he taught in Indiana, and so she's been here since high
That's
school.
cool.
So it's been
she's
amazing.
really American all the way.
She
Really.
is. Oh, totally. And we always tease. She and I always wear black. That's like our uniform. So Yaz and I laugh a lot about that. But we're all just family. We know each other. We all raised kids together.
That's so cool.
We just treat each other like family.
Is it all ladies? Do you hire men ever?
I have 2 men.
Okay.
I have Joey and Patrick. But my store staff, it's not that I'm opposed to hiring men. Not very many men want to work in a retail, interior design setting.
Yeah. And you already bragged about Aaron at the Drape House.
Mm-hmm. Aaron's my business partner with Drape House, and he's great. And his staff, he has a contracting company that does installs, like shade installs. Mm-hmm. You don't realize what all it takes to put a building together.
It takes a lot.
It takes a lot. And so you have to have people who are, motorization experts and who can handle the low voltage wire that has to go into your rod to be able to function a drape. And then, it's just all the little intricate pieces.
Everything's probably, not everything, but a lot of things are movable now, right?
Oh,
and controllable as a smart home, except as a
Everything
business.
interfaces into that if you want it. There are pros and cons in a commercial setting to doing that, though. Now, in a residence, yes, motorization's your friend, but it does cost 20 to 30% more.
Right.
Some people would say 50% more, depending on your markup. And, I operate on a very low markup. I'm a very lean run company.
Yeah.
There's just, in commercial work, there's not as much give as there is in residential.
Somebody will undercut you.
Right. And it is a tooth and nail.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
So what has caused you and Lifetime, to stay together for so long?
I don't know.
Is it
and it can be taken away in a heartbeat.
I know, right?
I'm not guaranteed that, right? So,
you
major
I
relationships.
assume you know some of the senior leaders almost even within that company and stuff.
Well, yeah, of course, as you do business, and also that company's set up to where they do value their relationships with their vendors. Some of their vendors have been there longer than me.
Wow.
And they, once you have that in place and you get into the rhythm of your client's business, and you can help drive that. And then also being a problem solver. A lot of these businesses don't have time to say, they just say, here's the problem, what do we need to do? And they can sometimes internally solve, but not always at that level. Why do they need to?
So here's a question about that kind of, because it's such a major, how transparent is the relative profitability and stuff? Very. So you've got to here's how much I'm spending. I get my 12% off the top or 50, whatever that is.
Yep.
And whatever. And here's what I'm doing.
Every invoice I submit has what my cost is, and then my retail. We retail to them. It's not like retail like you would see in this place,
right,
but in retail
Target.
to them.
Right.
And so they see net versus retail, and they can always go back in and calculate that. And I'm the purchasing agent calls me. I'm transparent. There are not any secrets.
That's scary though, right? It's both scary and a blessing because they're not gonna fire you because it came out of the blue that somebody could beat you by 40%.
Right. Well, I guess someone could try.
Not
I don't
with
know
your
how
quality,
they could.
though.
Right. And I would hope that would be the case.
Yeah.
But you never know. It is business, and everyone has a bottom line. I would suspect, and I don't care. I'm happy to always explain.
Yeah.
There's not anything. I'm honest.
Let's find a path to yes.
Right. And let's figure it out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Any business principles that you'd like to share, either for somebody in your space, in the design, and efficiently putting pretty things together and stuff like that, or even for women in business?
Right.
I'd love to hear a piece of advice from either of those fronts.
Well, I do think you have to know what you're talking about. You do need to be an expert in your field as far as being a woman-owned business or any kind of business owner, really.
Man-owned business, too.
Right. And you show your stupidity or your lack of, if you can't answer things thoughtfully and respectfully. I would say, people listening, Niche is not a perfect company. Rebecca Windsor, we are not perfect, but I will tell you that we own when we make a mistake, and we are going to fix it. And we're not going to fix it at your expense. There are unavoidable circumstances. If you have a flaw in a carpet, you cannot, there are certain things that I'm bound by with my manufacturer that I can offer or not. But I'm going to fix it, and you can guarantee that it'll be fixed correctly, and you're going to be, you may have a little bit of a lag, but you're going to like it when it's done. Also, people, well, I guess I'm going to digress a little bit, but when people don't understand that there is a process to things and they want to jump ahead of that, that's when dissatisfaction can occur. So I guess I would always say you have to set realistic expectations at the front. So like when I meet with a client, I try to say, we are honest. We have integrity here, and we're always going to be able to answer a question you should be able to ask at any time. I often will put in my letters of agreement that, we have transparent billing, and here's the Google Drive that you have access to, and you can look at anything I'm spending, and here we go.
Wow, that's
because
pretty wild.
I am going to tell you what I'm going to make. I am a for-profit business. I do have a right
want to make
money. I do have a cost of doing business, and that's in there, but we're happy to share that. So right now we're working on a project up in Estes Park, and it's a fairly large multi-million-dollar remodel. But with that's super easy. They can look at any time on the Google Drive, and they can find exactly what we're spending, and we already know what our cost is. So, and there are things that we can manage that way and things not. But it's a nice, transparent way to do things.
Oh, I think that's beautiful. One thing I think I talked with Val and Miles from Old Town Media is, and the dynamic of a marketing agency, and Jonna faces the same thing. Like, the more she can charge you for the less she can do, as long as they're getting results, that more she makes. And kind of the same with construction, right? Like the more, the less expense you can accrue to develop something that the customer is happy with, the better for your bottom line. But maybe not for your long-term relationships, but it's too opaque. You can't see it.
And so you have to look at it as if it, like, for instance, if I can sell a client a table that's going to last, like most tables are not going to last 10 years.
Yeah, I bought
They're
this one
last,
off the internet right here.
Right. And that's okay. But it may not last more than 3 years. So if it is in my clients, and there is a break-even point in that where we have to look and assess, like at some point you're going to need to update or remodel.
And how good is the design?
Right. And
it might be last physically or last even socially.
Right. And so we have seen a jump in that, of course, in the 20 years or so that I've done this. But that's a different scenario then.
Sure.
That is a different category, right? But as far as durability and things like that, we have met that original objective.
Part of your value proposition is, I'm going to get you the right stuff that'll last the right amount of time for your thing.
If you want it to last 5 years, we will get that to where you need to depreciate to zero. So that's fine. And then hopefully have a year or two after before you move into another CapEx venture. Because, see, everyone has build-out money, no problem. It's the replacement that becomes the difficult thing.
Where did you get your business knowledge from? Because I hear you using kind of fancy terms. It's obvious to me that, like, you're no MBA necessarily, but you know your way around a balance sheet, a profit and loss statement, like.
Well, you might ask my accountant that. I do. I know how to read it, and I get trained every month in a meeting.
Is it from your CPA and your advisors and things that you picked it up mostly?
I have been very blessed in my life to, and not to get super religious with anyone, but I mean, I pray about things, and and I ask for wisdom and guidance so that I can figure out, so I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's someone coming into my life and teaching me. Yeah. Sometimes it's me figuring it out. Sometimes it's the school of hard knocks. Yeah. You do. But you do have to know those things, because if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you need to go or how to pivot and change.
Yeah, I like that.
So.
It feels like, I asked one other question.
Sure.
Where are you going next? Are you doing something new?
Yeah,
are you just organic growth? I know you don't.
I am trying to.
Don't know for sure.
I'm trying to, at this point, we're merging brands together. Becky's Custom Interiors was started because I had to have a corporation to do business. And my accountant at the time, and I was going, I cannot come up with a name. I don't know. And so we just generically labeled it. And it probably needs to have a name change. But in the procurement world, it would be Rebecca Windsor. And so because most of those companies are named after a name, and I didn't want to. Allsup is too difficult. Who can pronounce that? And so, and I love England, and Windsor Castle is my favorite. So I came up with Rebecca Windsor because
Is it
it went
Rebecca
together.
with a CK or a CC?
CC.
Okay, just
the way
checking.
I spell my name. But I love Windsor Castle, so that's how I got the Windsor. And I just happened to live in Windsor, but that had nothing to do with it.
It just occurred to me that you're Becky because you're Rebecca.
Yes,
A little slow there, but
Yep, exactly.
so
After, I think I want to spend the next year focusing on growing that, and then trying to attract probably 1 to 2 more large scale companies in. And I've been working on one, and there's, but nothing in business is a done deal until the contract is signed and the deposit is paid.
And then it's maybe not even still a done deal sometimes these days.
When the deposit is paid, you usually
It's
know
pretty
you can
good done deal.
proceed.
Yeah,
but,
fair.
you know, but yes, it has to, the contract means really nothing in today's world. And you do have to really work at establishing it. And I've decided that maybe my, Lifetime is a publicly traded company, but small business, another small family held company or something, or boutique hotels, something like that, would be something where I'd be interested.
That's on a big,
now
nice
on the design
growth.
side, for a niche, our goal would always be to, of course, increase our market share in Fort Collins, etc. And, I meet with Jonna.
How big are you, do you think? Like, there's maybe 4 players in that space?
There's
on
probably...
the overall, or maybe 6 or 8, but a couple are small?
People who think they're players or people who really are. And that's the other thing, too, that is so hard in today's world is to know, with today's media, anyone can present. But what is the depth behind it? And so I've been lucky that I have enough depth with my commercial work to be able to do that. But I will tell you that there are a lot of companies here that do not. So, and I don't know how to really judge that. All I can do is ask my marketing gal to run me reports on my competition, which she does. I mean, at least probably once a week, she gets an email from me. I want to know net revenue, and I want to know da-da-da. And
How
she
do you
can
learn
run
that?
It's all done through analytics on the internet, and
wow.
I don't know how to do it, but she does.
Okay.
And, I kind of know where I sit.
Yeah.
I would say probably... like my calendar right now for someone to walk in our door, they will not see work start probably for 3 to 4 months because we're booked out. And we're busy enough for the staff that I have right now. We're scaled pretty fair.
Yeah, like you can't handle any more market share than you have right now.
Right. Now, I would love it. I would love it if I was the
there.
number 1 place in Fort Collins and no one else could do business. I mean, yes, that is the competitive side of me, but that's not fair. And there's also, that's also very selfish to say because everyone has a place to and a niche to put into society. And I'm not a one-stop fit all.
Yeah. I was... my friend Mike that told me, hey, Bear, you should start a think tank way back when, and we play ping pong regularly. So at the beginning, he had an auto repair shop, and he signed a 10% fixed rate loan to buy that building when he couldn't get financed and things like that. Anyway, long story short is, like, as he was growing his business, he had a $7,000 a month mortgage payment on a little startup mechanic shop, and meanwhile Huska's had their building paid off for 40 years, or whatever. It's like, it's really not a level playing field.
But does Huska do great work all the time, or is he more consistent? Yeah, I mean,
right, exactly. What is that
forth.
value proposition that you can get? What is the places where you can actually make a difference? But because those established players have a lot of momentum, they've got a lot of advantages that just help them.
And that's true. Like in
and then
Dallas,
they get lazy.
And they do. And that's just it. I don't ever want to get to the point I'm complacent.
Yeah.
And a few weeks ago, I had a client that complained that they were not treated the way they thought they were. And I take that very seriously. Number one, because it is my company. But, I had to assess. So I went back and looked, and I went back and I said, I think I can pull phone call logs and see how many times I did contact this person. And I made my staff go back and pull every email, text, or phone call so I could determine if I really had fallen down and what is the right appropriate amount of contact to
and
be
you can
had.
review at least maybe not the phone calls, but you can see what was said in the emails and stuff.
Right.
Because some people It's not very popular to quote Bill Cosby anymore, but one of the things that he said back in the day was, I don't know the secret to success, but the secret to failure is to try to make everybody happy.
Right. And that is
and some
hard
people
for
are
me.
just not make happyable.
Right. And I have had, that is very hard for me. I am a people pleaser. I like everyone to be happy. And that has been a huge challenge to learn that sometimes you cannot.
Right.
But I try to say, okay,
like,
I cannot.
I lost $45,000 in this job, and you're still not happy.
And the client does not always, in today's world with HGTV and all, especially
Right.
when we can see, like, or if you watch that Studio McGee show, I can't remember what it's
I
called.
haven't,
It's
but
on
I will.
Netflix or something. They go in and they, in an hour or 30 minutes, show you from start to finish a project. But that is not reality and the planning that goes on. And, the project one of the ones I'm working on right now, we have a great team, but there are just delays. I mean, sometimes you can't go up to Estes Park because there's snow and it's not safe, or I can't get a box truck up there up to the across from the YMCA in Windcliff. I can't get a box truck up there because there are no guardrails and it's a dirt road. I have to wait. And the client in Texas may not understand that, but it's a reality. And so again,
they only come up in the summertime.
Yes, and it's the resetting of an expectation, right? And so, but even I sometimes am shocked at how long it is really taking, right? I mean, but I have to also, the old adage, construction calendars are made to be broken, which while I hate that. Now, in commercial world, it's not that way. I set it and I can work it down to the hour.
Right.
And even when they delay on the last, like I will have a truck loaded, ready to go, and it will say, oh, we got a delay, 24 hours. Well, then I have to spend a day rescheduling everyone. I can do that. But on the residential side, it is so much harder because it is a personal thing, and it's your house, and it is it is an emotional thing as well. It's not just commercial, that's just business. That's business we can deal, but the heart side of it
I know
is
I
hard.
said I wanted this.
But I hate it, and I don't really like it. And can you take it back? But sometimes I can't.
Right. This is custom purple velvet, and we
Right.
talked about that. And the next person that asked me for custom crushed purple velvet might be
Yes.
3 years from now.
Right, and it probably never. In fact, I did a hotel, which is kind of funny, with purple fabric, and that was a really funny thing. You have to mass produce that, and to custom dye it, and when you need 500 yards of something, you have to find someone who can actually make it.
Right.
And so that was, people don't understand that.
Right, which
with
you
small
spent
business,
7 hours trying to find somebody that could actually make
Right.
custom purple dyed.
Right.
Whatever.
And then want to return it after they have approved it and still don't like it. And
But they're spending $500,000 with you, and so, God damn it, I want you to eat these
Exactly.
$40,000 purple blinds.
right. And that is the thing too, that the
Yeah.
consumer doesn't understand that they are responsible
Pardon my French.
that's okay. They are responsible in a large part for the death of retail.
Yeah.
And while we all complain that, well, there's nothing to go shopping for anymore, it's really our fault.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you go into a small business and you buy something, there's automatically a 3% fee associated with any kind of credit card charge, right?
Yep.
3 to 4%.
Yeah, 3.5.
And then when you
almost.
return it, there is another 3 to 4%. So now we're up to 8. Let's just say 8 for the heck of it. I'm
right.
sure it's 3.5 or something now. I don't know. Then we return it. Well, and then it goes back into stock. And so then the business owner absorbs that piece of inventory back in. So instead of being I just think that as a consumer, having a small business has made me very aware of what we expect and how unreasonable we can be sometimes.
I'm sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but I'm remembering a story from years ago when Amazon was first really a thing and online shopping and stuff. And somebody told me that they went and bought something that they loved, tried it on, used the staging room, put it on, loved it, bought it, brought it home, and then found it for like $15 less on
Right.
Amazon. And so they returned it and ordered it from Amazon. And I
Right.
was like, you're an evil person, and you don't
Right.
even realize
They
that you're
don't.
being terrible. You totally screwed that person's business.
Right.
Probably gave them a negative margin on that item.
Right.
And you helped their competition.
Exactly. And the competition may not be ethical because you don't know,
Right.
I mean, really who you're buying from at Amazon.
yeah.
And I'm not knocking Amazon.
whatever.
I mean, it's great to get toilet paper delivered in 15 minutes to your
Sure.
house. But as a small business, and especially in a small community, it is kind of my pet peeve. And of course, I can't let it bother me because I own a company and that's part of doing business. I get it. But when people do not respect the behind the scenes thing, and really small business is what builds America. Corporations don't care about their employees. I make sure every one of my employees is paid above market value, that they are entitled to bonuses, that I share my profitability with them, and I treat them as best as I can within the parameters that the Governor Polis has bestowed on me, which is, we can go into a whole nother political discussion on that.
By the way, do you have time to run over? We're about 20 minutes before
Sure.
5 now. Okay.
Yeah.
We're just getting into our closing segments, and I'm
Okay,
pretty sure we're
yeah.
not going to make it in 20 minutes. Based
I could
on...
go on forever.
So, anything else? I guess I feel comfortable saying, great job building an
Oh,
amazing
thank you.
business and a culture
We
of
have a
people
lot
that
to
want to be
learn.
part of your, and having that heart of still being open to learning. We've touched on faith. We just touched on politics, and we talk about family every time as well.
Yep.
Do you know where you'd want to start there?
Well, I've been married 32 years
Okay.
to a guy I've loved since I was 16. I'm
That's
very
awesome.
lucky that way. And like I said, I credit him with almost all of my success because, I mean, I realize I've
Number
had to
one
do
fan,
it.
at least.
Right, but he has really been the instrument in allowing the freedom. Not very many husbands would allow their wife to just decide they want to try something and then just support them no matter what. And that's what he's done.
In a podcast a long time ago now, a year and a half ago, I said to somebody that I think the woman is the decider. Jill actually told her mom, like, after our second date that she was going to marry me.
See?
And like that's kind of my theory, and I think it's for the best, really. Like
Yeah.
women that think that they have to hope to be chosen by somebody,
Yes.
like it's a downside. And you were, what was it about David that made you be like, I'm going to marry that fella, even though it took 8 years or whatever to have happen?
Well, I used to
or
be
6.
super nervous and a worry wart. Oh my gosh. I mean, that's
Anxious.
a Texas term, anxious about everything. And
Yeah.
my husband probably has never worried a day in his life. He's very methodical and just like, I thought that you had to unplug all the Christmas lights, before you could leave the house. That's how I was raised. You would unplug the lights from the wall. You never left a Christmas tree lit when you
Right,
left.
that's how Christmas trees start on fire.
Well, and that probably was back then, right? Now, probably not as much of a risk.
LED, no problem.
And I just remember one day David didn't unplug the tree. And we'd been married probably 4 years. And I just went nuts. I said, how could you not unplug that tree? And he said, Becky, how many hours have you had that tree plugged in? And I said, well, 8. He goes, did anything happen? And I said, well, no. And he goes, okay, so if we're gone for 30 minutes and nothing happens, it probably won't. In that 30 minutes, it probably would have happened 8 hours ago. But, just that kind of logic. And
yeah.
so as that was really great. And my boys benefited from that because had it been the way
right.
I would have raised very nervous
Helicopter
children.
mom, like making sure that nothing
Right.
bad happened.
But I read a book when I got pregnant called How to Parent with Love and Logic by Foster Klein out of Colorado Springs. I think
Yeah,
a guy
I
named
remember
Jim
that name.
Fay. But anyway, that book transformed my life because it fit in with David. And so the two of us parenting, we have 2 boys, 28 and 25.
Because you're easy to love and he's easy to logic.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And it just made sense. And it became fun. Like we never, in our family, our kids growing up, I mean, we had very little discord because we just made it was fun. Now we had rules
Sure.
and we had punishments at times, but
Yeah.
I never ever
Little
grounded
talk
my
back here or
children.
there, but,
I never grounded them. I never
Wow.
kept them home from something. It was the punishment fit the crime. And so it might be like, well, if you did that, then you're going to be within my eyesight for the next, 2 days, so you can't go further than over there, so have fun. But it was fun things. It was never condemnation. It was just, this is what it is, this is how we're going to go with it.
Yeah.
So anyway, my oldest son is married. They live in Minneapolis, and he's an engineer, she's an interior designer. She works
awesome.
for a residential firm in Minneapolis. And great kids, super amazing.
You may know, may not, that we always ask for a one-word description of your
yeah.
children. Did you come up with something?
So my daughter-in-law would be creative.
Okay.
My oldest son would be, he is definitely a people person, a networker.
Yeah.
And my youngest son is in Boston. He's getting his PhD at MIT, and he would be what I would call my introspective child.
Well, they don't just give PhDs from MIT away.
Yeah.
And I love, by the way, I have to share, I love that your daughter-in-law was part of your family.
Yes, of course she is.
Yeah, I think that's great.
When she got married, we told her the day she got married, she's our child, and we treat her no different. And when my youngest son gets married, there will be no difference there. And I've always learned that you don't divide your love with a family, you multiply it.
Yeah.
And that's what love really is.
So I'm remembering back to my early relationship with Jill right now, and thinking about her mom.
Mm-hmm.
And her saying, honey, there's going to be a time when you and Kurt are fighting, and when that time comes, the place to run to is to your husband to work it out.
Exactly.
You're not welcome back here for that.
And it's true, and that's how I have done with my children. And when Sam, or Taylor have their issues, as they do, it's always I take the devil's advocate role, that I'm going to pull for that marriage. I'm not going to pull for my child versus I'm not, because you know what?
I think that's so cool.
We pull for the unit, and that's how we do, and that's how Dave and I have done our whole family. We pull for the unit, and so we don't fight against each other. Now we have disagreements. We're not a flawless utopia family by any means. I mean, we've had issues and worked through things,
sure,
but we work as a team to solve something, not to go against.
Your son at MIT, I forget his name.
Ben.
And introspective was your word for him?
Yeah, he's thoughtful, and he is a deep thinker. He's really concerned about the inner behind the facade, like what makes people tick and all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what do you think he'll do as his next step?
Well, he's studying tuberculosis.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And
that's like the biggest easy button. If we spent like 1/15 of what we spent on the COVID fight on tuberculosis, we would improve the world by a hell of a lot more.
We would, and no one understands that it's still a very prevalent. It is the number one killer of people, I believe, that is virus related besides cancer, right?
Wow.
So, I mean, it's super high, and we don't deal with it in the U.S. as much, but, of course, in South America and Asia and in India, it's just extremely prevalent. And so when you tell people that's what he does, they go, oh, well, that's not a big deal, but it really is.
Isn't that what Wyatt Earp died from or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's old news.
So, I get lots of course, he works in the infectious disease building at MIT, and so he has lots of other cohorts in different areas. So COVID was an interesting thing to talk to him about.
Sure.
But, like I would send him something. He'd go, well, let's look at the source. And, he would figure it out. And it's kind of sad when your kids are smarter than you, but both of my boys are smarter than me.
Happens. It happens.
Yeah.
So before we leave the family segment, you had a shine on David, obviously, but what was it? What was his perception of you as that 16-year-old? And was there something that you worked him on? Or
that is so funny. Well, it's funny because, we lived in a small town. I would hope that he liked me. Definitely he did in college. But, it was an on-again, off-again relationship.
Right.
He broke up with me my freshman year during finals week.
Oh, wow.
I thought my mother was going to kill him. That was very traumatic. And so, and then, it ended up working out. God had a plan, and we all got married, and it's been good so far. It hasn't been easy. 32 years, you have a lot of ups and downs, and I wish I would have appreciated him probably more in the early years than I did. Just because of my nervousness, and you tend to think that they're doing it wrong, because when you are worrywart, you want to control. And as I've learned, that worry is very much is a pride thing. It's thinking that you can control an outcome when you really can't. Yeah. And like that's like saying you can prevent someone's death from being there. You cannot do it.
It's a faith thing too,
it
right?
It is, and learning that it's not about you.
One of my guests said 365 times, either fear not or worry not.
That's exactly right.
It's said. And it takes a while for some of us
to learn that.
I'm scolded of being kind of a whimsical guy, like I'm a bird don't worry kind of guy. And that also hasn't always benefited me either. And so,
But Matthew tells us that even the birds of the field don't worry
Right.
about where their food comes from. And that is the perspective we're to take, I think, in life, is that I've always felt like, you're directed through circumstance, right? Through your life. And if you worry about what's behind the door, you don't ever go through it. So you have to have the freedom to walk through, and then also understand that, yeah, sometimes you have to back out or whatever, but
Yeah.
going through the door is not the mistake. The mistake is not going through the door,
Yeah.
because then you don't know what the possibility is, right?
My dad used to say, son, I know you don't always know the right answer about what's right to do next, but do something.
Right.
And if you do it wrong, you can undo it.
Right.
And do something else.
Nothing cannot be undone. And that's something, too, with my job, is that in my
Business
voice,
and in life.
I can always help you undo it, but I can't always, if I don't know about it, I can't,
Yeah.
help. So
Yeah.
just trying to have that
Well, and that's
attitude.
faithful too, like bringing
Right.
it to the light, right? Like,
Right.
let's jump there yet. We'll finish up
Yeah.
with politics.
yay.
What you were Baptist girl,
Yeah,
stayed
Southern
that way
Baptist.
for
Yep.
quite a while.
Pretty much. We go to Timberline Church here.
Okay.
And that is not a Baptist church.
Yeah.
It's a Assembly of God, but it's non-denominational pretty much.
Yep.
And
What was your husband's background?
same, Southern
Okay.
Baptist.
Yep.
There is a lot of legalism sometimes in
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
especially in the South.
In the
more.
Baptist
Right.
realm,
And
especially.
as we have moved, I have probably become more liberal on some things and
Okay.
not on others.
All right.
But I think part of that is also just understanding human condition. And also, I don't believe that God is just all about judgment either. I believe that, and I also
Yeah.
believe that God allows us to work in our life, and we just have to learn to depend that He is directing, but that we don't, and not worry about that. When it's not about you,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier.
I mean, let God be the judge.
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure he has some pretty direct
Yes, he
scriptures
does.
about, judge not.
Yeah,
and
lest
all
ye
that.
be judged. Yes.
Yeah.
And also not
Well,
worrying.
even just the
He
glass
doesn't.
houses and stuff like that. Like, it's
Yeah.
all obvious that he knows that we suffer from
Yes.
weakness as humans.
And we're flawed. And the beauty of that is when you can admit you're flawed and still know that you have a place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that when you, lost my train of thought there, but
I'm sorry.
I think, no, that's not your fault. My brain just goes sometimes. But I do think that when we approach people from the way Jesus did at the woman at the well, there's not condemnation. There's knowledge about maybe a past, but it's just taking, and also understanding everyone has a backstory.
Right.
That day at the dry cleaner, when I wanted to get mad or whatever, maybe that lady had had a bad day. So I try to just always emulate the way I just try to always exhibit a happy love type facade instead of getting angry with people, trying to see that there is another side to it. I don't know. Maybe that's not right, but that's just kind of the way I prefer to live my life, with no regrets that way.
Did you ever have a faith season when you were like, I guess God doesn't really love me or doesn't really exist or anything? Or you didn't really have that?
I've been a Christian
of life.
from a very young age, 7. And
Wow.
when I decided to allow Christ to
Because
control my life.
Baptists don't baptize at birth; they baptize when you're ready.
Right, correct. And you
Okay.
have to make an individual decision.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Say
When
you
I
never
did that,
doubted,
so yes, you do go through that. And probably in my college years, I doubted maybe, like, I didn't have that miraculous change, right? I just kind of grew up in it.
Yeah.
And so, but that's not all bad. I think everyone has a different story. I just happened to have, it was just a way of life for me. And my parents, we were in church all the time. I mean, my spiritual heritage is very deep and rich.
Yeah.
I have my grandmother's Bible. She passed away quite a few years ago, but in there are just prayers that she prayed. And I don't think people appreciate enough the spiritual heritages that are given. And church, of course, now is so different. And we see that it's really
It's
faltering.
an experience of production in many cases.
Right. And a
whatever.
lot of people now just want to church hop because they want to go where they feel good. And that's not really necessarily, in
don't
my
call
opinion.
me out on my stuff. I'm out of here.
Yes,
right?
exactly. No one wants to hear that they're wrong or that there could be a different way. And
Right.
it's not a condemnation way. It's just a way to make you strive to be better.
Yeah.
But that's what people can't handle now, is that it's not about me.
Right.
They don't want to submit to authority. No one wants to allow there to be an authority over them.
I've
So,
talked about that before, how the word obedience I struggle with quite a bit, but surrender is easier.
right, but it's really the same.
The same difference,
Yeah.
but surrender, it's obvious that it's a higher power that you better surrender
Right.
to. Obedience, because we have so much call for obedience in today's
Right.
age. We'll get into that in the next section.
Yeah.
While we're still in the faith segment, though, I wonder, like, how is it through BSF that you got to know Suzanne, or how is it that you guys got to be friends?
I did. So I had started BSF in Minnesota.
Okay.
And then when I moved here, I didn't go for a while. And then finally I
And
decided.
this is Bible Study Fellowship, for
right.
those that don't know.
Right. And Fort Collins actually has a very vibrant one of those. And so I went in and I met Suzanne the first day I joined, and I was a leader because I had already been one, and so they needed one. So I became one. And Suzanne and I just hit it off, and she was very, very dear to me for many, many years.
Doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
I'm sure you don't know it, but BSF is actually one of the 4 kind of contributing elements of Local Think Tank.
Oh, really? That's neat.
Because in my second year of marriage, or maybe third year of marriage, and my roughly third year of Christianity, I kind of humored Jill by going to church with her the first time, although I was curious for a while before that. But they asked me to become a discussion leader for BSF.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't really know anything about the Bible, Jack. And they said, well, you don't have to.
Right.
You have a gift of leading people in conversation and drawing out quiet people, and you'll learn alongside the men. You don't need to know it ahead of time, really. And so that's the role that we have for our facilitators. You don't need to have the answers to provide the structure and the some level of wisdom to this conversation.
Yeah, and the thing about BSF that I encourage people in so much is you come to a place where it's a level playing field. You don't talk about your denomination or your background.
No dogma.
You just come in and you just read the Bible, and it's just a really cool experience to see that people agree. When there is just a single standard, you can interpret it different ways, but the underlying
what
theology,
does the Bible say?
Right, and it really is. But Amos, in the book of Amos, God drops this plumb line down, and He asks Amos, "What do you see?" And we all want to be the holder of that plumb line and adjust it how we would like, but there really is only one true plumb line. And unfortunately, and I know people don't agree all the time, and that's fine, but for me, there is only one truth. And if I can just try to follow that, then everything else falls into place. You have honesty, you have integrity, you don't have to worry about lying.
Yeah.
We all struggle with things, but that Amos plumb line, every time I look at that, and it just comes back to me that who's
really
holding
cool.
that? Is it me holding that and trying to tilt it?
Yeah.
But in design, everything has to be level or to the eye at least.
Right,
So
right.
it was just a real true thing that has kind of always hit me.
I love that. I love that. Everybody wants to talk about politics. How would you like to enter into that?
I'm a registered independent.
Okay, good.
And
I
I
voted
did
for
that,
Kanye in the last election.
and I did it after Trump.
Oh, really?
Because I was a Republican registered.
Okay.
And it's not that I personally like Donald Trump.
Okay.
I have a problem with his ego.
For sure.
But, I also love history and studying that. And if you look at our past presidents, every one of them is charismatic in some way. And some of them can use the charisma for good. And some can, look at Lyndon Johnson.
Right.
That man spoke in 4-letter words, and that's what a Southern Baptist Texan would say.
Right.
But, he cussed all the time. He had his committee meetings in the bathroom.
Right.
And he was not what we would call a couth person,
Right.
but he was a politician. And I think we also have to understand that power corrupts.
Well, some people play with power, and some people play with servanthood.
Right, exactly. And so there is a difference there. And so, while I don't approve of either party at this point and what they do, I think that but you can also see the underpinnings of what our Constitution was founded on. And I was just in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago, and I
Okay.
was at the Jefferson Memorial, and I had never seen those words on the memorial that say, we are as a society, we change, and we have to be adaptable to change. But yet we still have to have the foundation of our Constitution. And I think that's what he was saying. And I need to go back and reread that to really understand what he was trying to really say, right?
Yeah.
Because Jefferson definitely, he did help author a lot of things for us. But I thought it was interesting that he allowed, and it's carved in the marble that change was coming and that it would.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're in a civil war socially right now.
Oh,
with politics, definitely. It's just we aren't shooting. Well, we are shooting people, but not not with
we're not
guns
lined up on
battlefield.
sides either right now.
But we are, and we're murdering our fellow man, and we're taking away the humanity of who we really are. And it's sad over ideology and politics and religion that
we've got some new religions sprouting up.
Exactly. When the religion of self and indignation, whatever, that is the religion of me.
Yeah.
And it's not right. We have forgotten that our fellow man is important, and we are called to love them. I mean, and
even that simple phrase, others first, self second, or whatever.
Yeah, well, and love the Lord your God with all your heart and your neighbor as yourself. And when you can't put your neighbor into yourself, you are very lost at that point. And I think we've gotten to that a lot, and I see it every day. And so just trying to share optimism and happiness.
Yeah. It's not something you spend a lot of time thinking about, I imagine.
But you just smile at the lady that gives you your Starbucks, and say thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, and a sincere.
Even if she's clearly
right
doesn't have the same
ask
values.
Them, why did you get that tattoo? That's interesting. Right. Tell me, do you know that just asking questions like that, people will talk to you?
Yeah.
You don't even have to say a word. I mean, I can just ask a simple question, and then I can hear all kinds of stories, and then you can see where they're coming from, and then empathy comes from that too. So
I would call you kind of a conservative independent from a politics perspective. Don't trust none of them. The Democrats and the Republicans are two wings of the same kind of broken bird.
We're going to hope, and you have to, like, for instance, I don't care for Nancy Pelosi personally, right? But I can appreciate how brilliant she is.
She's a killer, yeah.
And as far as people that are in the, look who has been able to hold on power. She's very well dressed. She, but she does, and she's been able to pass bills without even anyone reading it. Okay, tell me about that. That's pretty incredible, right?
The Babylon Bee had a headline today that showed a construction project at the Capitol.
Right.
Capitol roof raised to accommodate Nancy Pelosi's eyebrows.
Well, and you look at, like, in D.C. now, they have all of these fences. We were talking about this last night at dinner with some friends. And I got really mad. I was in D.C. and Joe Biden's granddaughter was getting married that day. So, of course, you couldn't get within 2-block radius of the White House, and they were all in their sniper vests. They used to not be, but now they all have their vest on, and understandable. And they were walking on the roof of the White House. And I was just walking around because I love walking through that part of D.C. I just think it's incredible, cool. And it's just where we are founded.
I haven't been there since high school, but
you need to go. You need to take Jill and go. Walking through there in all these fences, but the fences are there to remind people that the Republicans are bad and that they caused that insurrection and that we are all in danger.
Right.
And it's still left up all over that district around the White House. You can't even walk through the Smithsonian Mall hardly.
Right.
It's hard to get to the Washington Monument. And it made me angry. It's like, I'm a taxpayer. I should be able to walk on this land. It's all owned by America. It's all of ours. But, that was a great political ploy we've made, and creating fear, because fear and worry go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And fear is about me.
Same thing mostly.
Yes, and it's all about control. And so when you look at that, to instigate fear, once you have convinced people that they need something, you are very easy to create other things. So you got to convince them that they can't do it on their own and worry.
How has this COVID nation been for your various business interests, hiring, politics around that, right? We got multi-generational firms and I don't see you as somebody that cares if somebody's a Democratic or Republican or a vaxxer or anti-vaxxer when you hire them.
I would hire anyone. It doesn't matter to me. And I honestly, that is the truth. I care more about the character you have. I could care less about your background. I don't care if you've been in prison. I don't care if you have done drugs. I don't care. I care about who you are today and being honest with me. Again, because I have to be able to have an acceptable risk, obviously.
Right.
But,
well, because you got to execute.
Right.
We were talking before the show started even
Right.
how much better it is for your firm if you can leave there and
Right.
dust your hands off and be gone instead of like
Exactly.
running back for a punch list.
But my best employees are the ones that have struggled and have overcome. So I'm happy for anything, any kind of
Wherever they
challenge
come
like
from.
that. Yeah, it doesn't matter to me at all, right? I care about the honesty right here in front of me and the
Yeah.
relationship that we can develop. So, but through COVID, it was hard. We stayed open. We did have a
You were
decrease-
essential, I guess.
Well,
Were they still opening stores for any time?
I might get in trouble.
You were in Windsor-ish.
I was in Loveland.
Loveland was
and when
fine.
they
You
did
guys were
that
the great-
stupid mandate, I just kept my doors open. I
You
was not
did.
going to bow down to that, and I'm probably going to get in trouble now.
Well, so I'd ask you about Kathy and David Burks. Kathy runs the Sweetheart Winery.
Yes.
And David
Just
works at
down.
Seagate
Yeah.
yet. And it was fall of 21 when I came to see her, and she won't mind if I share this story, I'm sure. I go there, and they had just put the mask mandate back on, and there was no sign on her door. And so I walked in without my mask on, and I was like, so I noticed there wasn't a sign on your door. She's like, there's any difference of like you walking from the door to here and sitting down at this table and then taking your mask off?
Right.
Like, I know there's no difference in risk for that. I don't know what the risk is. I've been a rule follower all my life. She was a Deloitte and Touche auditor. And like these crazy people have turned me into, I guess, a rebel. Like
Well,
apparently,
and
if I read the headlines, I'm some kind of an anti-masker rebel at this point.
The
but
law was
whatever.
transferring the policing to the business owner, which was I disagreed with in theory.
Right. So your
So
your
there was
employees
no
have
sign
to
on my
call
door.
people out.
Right, and we did not. So how we handled it, I put hand sanitizer at the front door because, I mean, we are a design firm and you touch things. So if you wanted, I had hand sanitizer. I still have tons of hand sanitizer.
Right, I got 2 gallons in the closet.
My gosh,
actually.
I know, it's just everywhere. But if you wanted to do that, then you could. It was your choice. I had a mask box at the front door if you wanted a mask, because if you require a mask, you have to provide it at the time. I don't understand all of that. But anyway, I
yeah.
just had a box there. And if someone walked in and had a mask on, I asked my staff to be respectful and put one on if someone walked in with one.
Oh, that's
But if
a really nice place to
no
live.
one had,
Like,
if you walked in without one, we didn't wear ours.
and were your staff all okay with that?
They
Like,
were okay, and if
nobody was
they wanted to
upset
wear
about-
one,
yeah.
they could wear one.
Okay.
And I just had COVID recently.
Oh, you
believe
did?
it or not,
First time?
First time. And
Wow,
and I even have MS, and I hadn't gotten it yet. I got it for the first time a
Wow.
few days ago. But I texted my son at MIT, and I said, "So tell me really what's the difference between COVID and the flu, because all of the symptoms are the same." And he wrote back, "Mom, you take a test and find out." And I said, "Well, I guess
This
that's
is your
how."
super thoughtful son.
Yeah. So I took a test and I found out I was positive.
The flu wouldn't impact the election.
It wouldn't, right? And yeah,
Sorry.
and neither
We-
would pneumonia or anything else. And I was on the plane probably when I got sick. I was sitting on a plane coming back from Florida, and the man behind me was coughing. And even me, who believes it is your choice whether you would wear a mask or not, and I should not be required to
Right.
for you, vice versa. Now I will. Out of a respect for someone, if I knew that my friend had cancer and was going through chemo, I would put a mask on in
Sure.
a heartbeat. There's no doubt.
Or even if they were just very...
Very paranoid,
Nervous,
I would
right.
do, yeah, or nervous, yeah. And I shouldn't have said paranoid, but nervous. You're right.
Well, it's not
But
paranoia if people are actually after you.
you have to fight that feeling. Like I was listening to him cough, and I was sitting there, and at first I went,
Like every cringe.
I am going to get sick. And I thought,
Oh,
but-
that's the person that gave you the... Maybe.
well, I don't know, right?
But as
I
likely as
doubt it,
anybody.
really. But I just thought, but then I thought, you do not have the right to sit there and even think that, because everyone is breathing, and you're also in an airplane. It's great
Right.
filtration. And I thought, you don't have the right to judge someone for coughing, but yet people do now. See, we've done
Sure.
that. We've created enemies with each other because we can't see that everyone exposes everyone every day. Just me talking to you here
Sure.
in this closed
Yeah,
room,
yeah,
I've
we're
probably
spraying
shared
on
all
each
my
other
germs.
right now, yeah.
And we have for years. And
how we
look
get
at all the
stronger.
kids that blew out candles on birthday cakes for years and
Right.
spit
Yeah,
on it
totally.
because they don't know how to blow the candle out yet. And yet we all ate that cake and no one thought anything about it. But we have created fear and made, because of that fear, you become superior.
Yeah.
And because you're sitting in
I'm
judgment.
protecting you, and you are, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother thing too about how much do we,
Well, it's the worship of self. And
well,
all
yeah,
that.
and it's just like with, discrimination and all. When we think that we can help people because with our set of rules, it's like the Poisonwood Bible. The missionary goes to Africa, and in Africa they mound up the dirt and they have a circle around the plant to keep the moisture in. And that's not how you did it in Georgia. He was a missionary, and he wanted them to plow the field the way the American did, and then they all starved. And it's because we cannot, and that's just a novel, right?
Yeah.
But it's a principle
one-
that it is not always up to me to impose my thoughts and things on everyone else. And why can't we just, and also, but I am called to be kind and understand everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
And so kind, and I have a saying in my laundry room that grace is not something you say at the table. It's what we extend to everyone. And just extending grace. It's just like, what's wrong with that?
I think it's a good practice.
Yeah.
Do you want to share your loco experience, your crazy experience from your life of business or family or whatever that's shifted, changed your thinking? I don't know what it was.
Well, I'll tell you.
Maybe you were in a drag race with the cops. I don't know.
It was actually what kind of molded me was it's something that just stands out in my mind. And I had just moved to Minnesota, and we had a women's night with all these cute young. People in Minnesota are beautiful. They're all Scandinavian.
They
They're
are.
blonde haired. They're skinny,
Yep.
and they're beautiful. And they are all very nice dressers.
Was this
believe it
bunco?
or not. It was kind of like that. It was a girls group. We golfed and stuff. So we decided we had to go bowling because it was raining. And I spent 3 hours picking out my outfit. I was just super nervous, trying to fit in.
Right.
The Texan and all. And we go bowling, and they're all drinking, and I'm Southern Baptist. You don't drink. And I had Dr. Pepper.
Well, they're from Minnesota, so they're really good at it.
Yeah, they are. And so we go bowling, and my first time up, I get ready to go, and I bowl, and I find myself flying face first down that aisle, and I went on my stomach face first toward the pins. I got a strike, but I was halfway through. I fall, obviously.
Like the ball came away from your hand
and I just
after
kept
you were
going.
laying down already.
Flat on my face down. And I remember sitting there going, I think I'm going to have to move. David and I can't live here. We're going to have to go somewhere else. And I got up and I turned around. And of course, everyone was laughing. And I finally realized then, okay, you can laugh at yourself. You don't have to take yourself seriously. But it was like the first real experience in my life.
That's so cool.
But it was so humiliating.
Well, and if you were in Boston, they would have been all judgy Judies.
They may
But in
have.
Minnesota, they're like, Becky, that was awesome.
Yeah. And they go, are you drinking? And I go, Dr. Pepper. And then that was even worse, Oh, yeah.
I like it. Well, I love how it was that instant and like a dose of humility and grace.
Yeah.
Like your friends gave you grace.
Yeah.
You realized that you didn't need to move away after that.
It took me, I seriously remember standing up, looking at those pins going, I don't know how I'm going to tell David we have to move.
That's awesome. If some amazing boutique inn that's expanding or some other place that wants to have your firm put their stuff together for them, where do they find you?
Well, we're on the internet, and we are on Instagram and Facebook, of course, and niche-designhouse.com.
Okay,
that's our
so
URL.
That's your local one. Oh, that's your
our
whole
local
thing.
one. That's really probably the easiest way to get a hold of us.
And that's our listeners are actually Northern Colorado anyway. So just roll in a niche.
Yep.
If you don't see Becky there, which you usually
You can
won't
always
because she's
ask.
running all over, but ask for her and then...
we'll give you my personal cell. I'm always available.
I love it. Any last words of wisdom? You and I just had a conversation about being a part of Loco Think Tank.
Yep.
Would you care to share any background about why that
Well,
is?
we were just talking about that, and my New Year's resolution this year is to become more involved. Like I said, my company was built solely on me and my associates, but my money, my investment, my husband and mine's investment,
your risk,
and our risk, and so I have never really branched out. I have not really.
You don't really have a mentor to speak of,
No.
except for that young lady that or that person that helped you when you were in Minnesota yet and said,
Yep.
you can do this, that's fine?
Right. And he just retired, and I
Other person.
cried when he told me he was retiring. And he's a very dear friend. I call him a friend now and colleague, but I don't have a mentor. You know,
Yeah.
I am 100% owner in my company. When I have a board meeting, Becky talks to Becky, and we make some
Right.
decisions. And while that has been great, and of course my husband's a part of a
Sure,
lot of those, and
sure.
I have friends that I have discussed things with. And luckily, I have had great people come in and out of my life. But, you know, I just decided I needed to be a little bit more purposeful about the next step and to maybe become more community minded.
Awesome.
So,
Well, I think any group that has you would be
Oh,
blessed by it.
thank you.
And I've loved it, this time together. And yeah, thank you. I
Thank you.
really enjoyed this time, and I thank you so much, Becky.
well, Suzanne was right. You've made a great addition to her family.
I'm proud to be a part of her family.
Yeah.
All right,
Thanks.
that's good.
Thank you for listening to this episode. This is Alma Ferrer, producer of the Loco Experience podcast. If you enjoyed this program and would like to support the show, please share it with your favorite people and leave us a review. To see upcoming guests, behind the scenes footage, and more, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at The Loco Experience. Subscribe to never miss the latest interview, and until next time, stay loco.